All right, what is up, Utah fans? This is Joseph back with the Utah Utes Football Digest. And I think it is safe to say that this is the week that the season officially starts for Utah, right? Last week was awesome. Huge win, 49-0 against Southern Utah University. But this is the week where we get a conference opponent. It's not a conference game, but it's a conference opponent. Still weird to say that. But that's the world of conference realignment for us. But it's a really good test for Utah. And I don't think this season could kind of ramp up and get us ready for what's to come better than these first few weeks. And Baylor, as Baylor heads into Rice Eccles to take on Utah, is going to be a great example of that, guys. Seriously, this is going to be a fun matchup to talk about. I'm excited to break it down. If you guys are newer to the channel, you might not know we're a part of the 1012 network. We have a quick ad read to do from an awesome company called Charlie Hustle. This podcast is brought to you by our friends at Charlie Hustle, clothing company, a vintage-inspired clothing company based out of Kansas City that specializes in collegiate and hometown apparel. Charlie Hustle loves the Big 12 conference and wants every Big 12 fan to be the best dressed this season. Their wide selection of officially licensed collegiate apparel. That includes Utah gear, which they launched this summer in honor of the Utes joining the Big 12. Use promo code 101215 for 15% off all non-sale items. With more than 30 schools to choose from, including all 16 Big 12 schools, they've got you covered with all of your collegiate apparel needs. Shop today at www.charliehustle.com and use the promo code 101215 for 15% off all non-sale items. Again, that's charliehustle.com. Promo code 101215 for 15% off all non-sale items. Charlie Hustle, vintage made fresh. Awesome sponsor of the podcast, by the way. Their clothes are awesome. If you guys do want to check it out, please do. They sent me some of their clothes, and I really do enjoy them. They're not just. I wouldn't add that on to the end of the ad read if I didn't really like the product. So good stuff. Check them out. But like I said, guys, a ton to talk about today. Utah is taking on their first conference opponent of the year. Not conference play, but a conference opponent in Big 12's very own Baylor Bears. They're coming to Rice Eccles. It's going to be a ton of fun, guys. We're going to break down a lot. We're going to talk about the top players on Baylor to watch. We're going to talk about the top matchups to watch, young players for Utah that stood out last week that we're keeping an eye on to follow it up with an awesome performance this week. It's going to be a lot of fun. We'll talk about keys to the game, what's going to win or lose us this game. Before we dive in, comment down below. What do you guys think about the Baylor game? What is your score prediction? Who do you think we need to keep an eye on? What are you concerned about? I want to hear it all. Write it right now before we dive into the video, guys. I want to interact with you. I'll try to comment back as much as I can. And if you haven't already, this is the source for Utah Utes football. Subscribe to the channel. We put out a ton of Utah Utes football content. We don't do gymnastics. We don't do basketball. We don't do baseball. It's Utah Utes football. And I try to give you guys the most in-depth, most fully thought out, thorough analysis of games and players that I can give. And I hope you guys appreciate it. Without any further ado, let's dive in. Let's talk Utah versus Baylor. And let's go ahead and start off the video here, guys, in the Utah versus Baylor game, talking about last year's game. Now, Utah headed into Waco to take on Baylor and the Bears to a very, very hot game where Utah barely squeaked out the win, 20-13. And last year was a rough year for Baylor. They were not a good team. So for them to keep it that close against Utah was, pretty impressive. But let's take both in context. So one thing I think is absolutely worth mentioning, and I think Baylor fans will appreciate this, this is not the Baylor team of last year. They have brought in a lot of talent in the transfer portal, and we'll touch on all that in a little bit here, but they are not the team of last year. They noticed their flaws. They loaded up, brought in as much talent as they could, and they really do look like a significantly better team. They still have, the core that they had last year, but they brought in some high-powered talent that can take the offense and defense up a notch. But Utah, on the other hand, is not the same Utah team that Baylor played last year. Now, Utah was able to scrap their way to an 8-5 season, but this Utah team was run down with injuries and was missing key vital players in this Baylor game. And so, in both regards, Baylor should be a good amount better this year. But Utah, I mean, we're talking Brant Keithy and Cam Rising, guys. This is not the same Utah team that Baylor played last year. And Utah should be taking huge strides this year. We already saw week one. The team looked amazing. We looked like a high-powered offense. Obviously, it was against SUU, but it was some of the best offensive football I've seen from Utah in years. Like, that was one of the best offensive games I've seen. It was very impressive. Again, Baylor looked just as impressive in their week one opener. These are two, I think Utah is widely considered the team that's going to win the Big 12, where Baylor is a very questionable team, right? What are they going to be? What can their new quarterback and new high-powered transfer weapons lead them to this year? I think that's more of the questions about Baylor, where Utah's, what is that ceiling? How good could they be? So just to give you guys an idea, the point of this breakdown before we dive into all the nuts and bolts is Baylor's better than they were. Utah's a lot better than they were, and Baylor could be way better than they were. I wouldn't look too much at last year's game and take too much from that. But I just wanted to make sure we add some context here with Utah's getting back to superstar players. Now, obviously, we've had some players leave as well. We lost a lot of players to the draft, but still a ton of talent for Utah. And Baylor has kind of revamped their team and looks like a much better team than last year. And now let's go ahead and next, we're going to talk about the top players from Baylor that we're going to want to keep an eye on in this game that could, really make a difference as they come into Rice Eccles. Okay, guys, and now we are going to be looking at the players to watch for Baylor. So I think there's a clear 5 guys for me. There's some other good players as well, but I think these were the 5 for me that really stood out. So let's go ahead and dive in. Let's talk about them. It all starts with quarterback DeQuan Finn. 5 years at Toledo, looked like a superstar over the past couple of years at Toledo. Big time dual threat, can kill you through the air, can kill you on the ground, very fast, athletic player. In 2023, a 79.3 PFF grade, 800 plus total snaps, the clear leader of that team, 22 passing touchdowns, 7 rushing touchdowns. Like I mentioned, guys, DeQuan Finn is a big factor of this offense. Week 1 against Tarleton State, though, he did struggle. 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, right? That's not the stat line you want against an FCS team. Now, I think it's great that we're catching this guy early in the season because I have him right in the middle of the pack for my Big 12 quarterbacks, but I think he has a ton of upside, and I like that we're catching them at home. I think we've got a really good chance for that home crowd to rattle him a little bit and give him a tough time. But still, DeQuan Finn, he's being talked about by a lot of people and definitely a guy to keep your eye on in this game. Then we've got Ashton Hawkins, wide receiver, a 66.8 PFF grade in 2023 on 851 snaps, over 800 receiving yards and 3 touchdowns. This was at Texas State. He's a transfer coming into Baylor, but definitely a guy that brings a lot of, explosiveness to this offense, and a guy that I'm going to imagine is going to be an important weapon for DeQuan Finn. I think it's keeping an eye on this guy and making sure we can do a good job of limiting his explosiveness will be important. Another guy, though, they're getting from the G5, and you got to wonder, how is he going to translate to P5? He's going to be going up against a good cornerback room, right? Keenan Johnson's out, but there's still a lot of good corners in that room, which we'll touch on later, but still a lot of good corners. Then, speaking of corners, they have Caden Jenkins. Now, this is a guy that was on the Baylor team last year, 76 PFF grade in 2023 on 551 snaps. And what's more impressive is on those 551 snaps, it's almost exclusively at outside corner. And, not all reps are created equal, right, guys? Not all reps are created equal. And when you're outside one-on-one with a wide receiver, whether that's their number 1 receiver or their number 2 receiver, those are tough reps. And the fact that he was able to put up that PFF grade on that many snaps, pretty impressive, and definitely a kid to keep your eye on. We've also got Kendrick Simpkins. Kendrick Simpkins is another transfer from G5 from Western Kentucky, a 70.2 PFF grade in 2023 on 771 snaps. The kid had 4 forced fumbles, and 1/3 of his snaps are in the box. So this is a hard-hitting, run-stopping safety. Versatile, though, has another 1/3 of his snaps at free safety and another third of his snaps at slot, but definitely stands out to me his ability to stop the run, his ability to make, to force turnovers in the, but with his physicality. Finally, we're going to talk about Richard Reese. Richard Reese is a running back for Baylor. He has been on the team for a few years now. Richard Reese looks like a very good player. Kind of a tale of a solid to good player, but definitely 2022 was the year that he really shot off the charts. An 85.1 PFF grade, 4.9 yards a carry on, nearly 1,000 yards here for Richard Reese, 972 yards, 14 touchdowns. Really, really impressive stat line there. 2023, not so much. 4.6 yards a carry, still a good stat line. 306 yards, 2 touchdowns. And so I'm going to imagine this is going to be a guy they're going to want to get involved in the game and get involved early. A lot of option, right? This is another smaller, explosive guy. 5'9", 181 pounds. But that's kind of the 5 people for me at Baylor that I'm saying we really need to keep an eye on. Just to run it back by you guys, we got Ashton Hawkins at wide receiver, Daquan Finn at quarterback, Caden Jenkins at cornerback, Kendrick Simpkins at safety, and then we have Richard Reese at running back. Those are the top 5 weapons, in my opinion, that Baylor is going to have. A lot of G5 guys, right, that are transitioning to P5, and catching them early could be a really big deal for us and give us a big advantage there. All right, guys. And next, I am going to give you guys 5 young, up-and-coming Utah players that showed out last week, have shown flashes in the past, have been promising, but really showed out last week. And guys that I'm excited to see if they can take the next step in a real, P5 conference level quality game and see if they can follow it up. And so the first guy I'm going to call out, actually, I'm going to call out 2 guys as kind of a pair where, I'm actually going to make it 3. I guess one of them doesn't fit the criteria. But Cam Calhoun's back, right? And with the injury to Keenan Johnson, I think when he gets in there, if he's the guy, I think it's going to be important that he steps up. And if he's out there a lot, I'll be keeping a close eye on him. But guys that we did see out there last week against Southern Utah that looked really good at corner, 2 guys, Smith Snowden and Elijah Davis. Smith Snowden had a 73.0 PFF grade on 43 snaps. So he's getting tested. 18 in run defense, 24 in coverage, and looked really good across the board. I was really impressed with Smith Snowden. I think he's primed to really take that next step this year, and I'm going to be watching him in this game. The other guy I'm super excited to watch is Elijah Davis. Elijah Davis had that interception, baited the quarterback to throw it, jumps in there and picks it off. Very impressive. And he graded out on 28 snaps at a 79.6. So this guy had to fill in for Keenan Johnson and looked really, really good doing it, guys. Those are 3 young, talented corners that I think are all going to see some playing time in this game. And if we can get, at least 2 of them to continue that type of high level of performance, that would be very exciting for Utah. Another guy I'd really like to see follow it up this year with a big year. I guess he's not a young up-and-comer, but I mean, he is an up-and-comer, is Keanu Tanuvasa, a guy that feels like he's been budding on a breakout since last year. And kind of had some big flashes, ups and downs last year, but we all saw the flashes and know what he could be. Last week he graded out at a 76.5 on 24 snaps. Again, it's against Southern Utah, But I have big hopes for Keanu Tanavasa, and I'm really excited to see how he follows it up this week. If he can get in there when he gets his reps, because I'm sure he'll be a part of this rotation, if he can get in there and cause some havoc in the middle of that offense, that offensive line, it'll do a big deal for this Utah team. And I think he knows that, and I think he's, in my opinion at least, up to the challenge, right? He looks like a great player for me. Now I'm going to switch over to the offense for Utah. So there was a few players on offense as well that really stepped up last week. I'm sure one of them, like when I'm talking about young up and coming players that flashed last week, one of them is obvious in Dijon Stanley, right? Just a crazy game, 185 receiving yards, something like that. Let me pull up the actual stat line. All right. Dijon Stanley. Yep. Okay. Yeah, so last week, was it 150 receiving yards and 185 total yards? So 184. So 34 rushing yards, 150 receiving yards, and 2 receiving touchdowns. 2 nasty wheel routes where he just torched the defense, right? It was such an awesome 2 plays and looked solid running the ball as well. PFF grade wise, he graded out at a 77.4. He looked like a straight up stud. I can't wait to see how he follows that up. I'm going to be watching with bated breath. I'm very, very excited to see how he follows up such an impressive performance. And that was for Dijon Stanley. He was on 18 snaps. And if you think about that, on that 18 snaps, he was getting the ball a lot of those 18 snaps. Next up, I'm going to go with Dadron Zipperer. Dadron Zipperer looked really talented last week. Again, he was playing with the second team, but it's still against SUU's first team that was out there. And on 32 snaps, he graded out at a 70.1. I was very impressed with what we saw from him, and I'm very excited to see how he might take this next step as we head into the coming weeks. Super exciting, guys. But those are the young players I'm excited to keep an eye on this week for Utah. Cam Calhoun, Smith Snowden, Elijah Davis in the cornerback room. Keanu Tanavasa at the defensive interior. Dijon Stanley at running back, seeing how many reps he gets, how involved do they actually get him. And then Dadron Zipperer. It felt like he definitely earned his ability to steal some reps, right, at this wide receiver spot, at least be a part of that official rotation. I'm excited to see how many reps he gets and kind of how they use him this week. But those are the young, up and coming guys for Utah I'll be keeping an eye on. Okay, guys, and now let's talk about how we think the game is going to go. So, Baylor last year, let's start with their defense, right? I've mentioned this will not be the same Baylor team, but overhauling a team does not happen overnight. The majority of the team is still going to have the same deficiencies they had before, right? And their defense was abysmal last year, very rough, 119th in the country, allowing 443 yards per game. Against the run, it was rough as well. And this is where it really stands out to me how much they struggled. They allowed 188.7 yards per game. That's 120th in the country. Against the pass, they weren't much better. 104th in the country, 254.3 yards per game. So this was a defense that struggled mightily, right? Really, really had a bad time. And for Utah, we have a long history of being a stable running team. Last year was a year where we had no quarterback and teams were able to crowd the box against us, and we still ran the ball reasonably well. This year, we have our guy back in Cam Rising, and I think we're going to really take advantage of both avenues where we're throwing and running. But you look at that run defense, guys, it is a gaping hole for Baylor. And I've got to imagine they're going to know that we're going to want to come in there and beat the crap out of them running that ball. 119th in the country, 120th in the country at run defense. We are going to attack, and we are going to test our run game against your run defense. And I'm very confident we'll win. I think if anything, this will be a really good opportunity for us to mesh the offensive line, the running backs, kind of figure some of that out early in the year and solidify that. And then I think if they do start stacking the box, we'll throw. But I think this is what's going to happen. They're not going to be able to stack the box. As much as they know we can run the ball, they're also going to know that Cam Rising is one of the best players in all of college football. Brant Keithy is one of the best players in all of college football. We've got a very talented wide receiver core. And if you stack that box or even hint at it, we are going to gash you apart through the air. And so I think what's going to happen, I really see this playing out this way in my mind with our offense against their defense, is they are going to put 6-7 men in the box, and we're going to kill them with death by 1,000 cuts, right? It's just going to be 4 yards, 5 yards, 6 yards, 3 yards, 5 yards, 6 yards. Just boom, 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 punch them in the face, have Cam convert on some critical 3rd and 5s, 3rd and 4s. And anytime they do oversell to one side or the other, I think we have a team that can really take advantage of it. And don't forget, guys, like some of this running back room, like a Jalen Glover and a who's another guy, Mike Mitchell even. I think Jalen Glover is a better example, though. They were just running into 8-man boxes last year because they knew we weren't going to throw the ball, or at least we couldn't, right? We didn't have the ability to throw the ball. And so Jalen Glover is a guy, like, we don't know how good he is because his year where he really got to get a lot of reps was years going against 8-man boxes. And so we're going to find out what our run game is in this game. I think it's going to tell us a lot. Now, I do think that their run game is not 120th in the country anymore, or their run defense, I mean. I think they've taken some strides, and they're probably a good amount better than that. I mentioned Kendrick Simpkins, right? Probably going to help them out in the run defense. But I think we're going to test it. I think we're going to win that battle, and I think when we have to, we'll throw just fine. I think if they try to overcommit to stopping Cam Rising, the run's going to make him pay. And if they even think about overcommitting to stop the run, Cam Rising will cut their heart out. Now, let's move to the other side of the ball, right? So we're going to talk about our defense against their offense. So Utah finished number 17th in the country in total defense last year, 322 yards allowed per game. And against the run, super impressive, number 4 in the country, 84 yards per game allowed. Now, we did struggle at times against the pass. Now, against the pass, it was not the exact same story. We were 79th in the country with 237 yards allowed per game. So we did have some susceptibility to giving up some passes. And I think that'll still be there, especially with the injury of Keenan Johnson. Now, there is a corner that used to be on our team that I really wholeheartedly believe gave up a lot of those yards. And he's not on the team anymore, and not going to badmouth him. A lot of you guys know who he is. But it's, I think a lot of that is just gone. Like where they would get these wide open plays and every big breakaway pass was to this one part of the field. But anyways, going back to my point is I think they have a good running back and a good quarterback, at least a quarterback that could be good in DeQuan Finn, that they're going to try to run the ball. They're going to hit us with the options, and I think they're going to have some success early, especially with running when they try to throw. One thing our defense always struggles with is containing the edge, especially early in the year, right? Our edge rushers always have some struggles making sure the quarterback and running backs don't get outside of them, and I think we'll see a few big chunk plays early in the game. I think they'll also throw the ball pretty decently early in the game. I think we mentioned some of the receiving talent that they brought in. There's other receiving talent they already have, and I think they'll throw the ball reasonably well. I think the problem is going to come with DeQuan Finn. If he's not able to do it against Tarleton State, and let me backtrack. I think they'll throw the ball reasonably well early in the game, right? Once our scheme starts taking effect and we kind of figure out what they're trying to do and Morgan Scalley adjusts, I think DeQuan Finn's deficiencies of reading defenses and making bad decisions are going to start standing out, and we're going to take advantage of it, and it's going to be a bad time for them. And then they're going to be forced to run the ball against a defense that does not allow any rushing yards. And they're going to run into a stone wall. Once we get going and once we figure out what you're trying to do, we'll keep it close early, right? I think it'll be a first quarter of feeling each other out, and they'll score, we'll score. But then once we get going, it's going to be a bad time. They're not going to be in positions where they want to throw. They're going to be in positions where they have to throw, right? They're going to try to run on us, and then they'll get 2nd and 9, 3rd and 7, and then on 3rd and 7, they're going to need Daquan Finn to make a big play. And I think he's going to make those mistakes and turn the ball over. And I think that's where we have our big advantages. Now, this is a solid team. They're, like I mentioned, they're going to put up points. And I think early they're going to put up some points. I wouldn't even be shocked if they took an early lead, right? Especially with so many explosive weapons on offense. But as we adjust, I think we'll see their offense really get bottlenecked. And I think we'll see our offense adjust and start, kind of churning and like I mentioned earlier, death by 1,000 cuts, just pounding that rock against them and throwing. So kind of how I predict this game going, like I mentioned, I think they'll score some points, like 7 to 10 points in the first half, maybe even 14 points. And we'll kind of keep on pace with that too. But I do think what's going to happen is as we settle into the game and kind of some of the predictions where we're really running the ball on them, we're really tiring out their defense, and they're going to start having to not just fully commit to stopping Cam throwing the ball. They're going to have to commit to stopping the run as well. It's going to put them in some bad spots, and we're going to, brutally take advantage of that. And then on our defensive end of the ball, I think they're going to, like I mentioned, have early success, but then once we adjust and make our adjustments, they're not going to be able to run. They're going to be forced to throw. And I do believe that we have a good DB room, and I don't think our passing yards allowed last year really reflects what our team is capable of. And I think we're going to do well. The spread is 14 points. I see us covering that. My prediction is 34-17. I think as the game gets going, we'll just kind of slowly start pulling away. As getting into halftime is probably something like 17-10. Early second half, it starts to separate as we make the adjustments, and slowly we just kind of pull away in that game. And it could even be less close in the actual game than what the scoreboard shows. So 34-17 is my prediction, guys. Before we get out of here, please make sure you smash the like button. I also want you guys to comment down below. What are your thoughts on the game? Anyone I'm missing? Anyone I'm not talking about? Any takes that you guys feel I'm talking about that are wrong? I really want to know what you guys think. And, early in these seasons, just to give you guys some context, for me, I'm a really analytical guy, and there's not a ton of data on each team. And as we get further into the season, there will be more data on every team we play and games where they played like actual good opponents, right? And so that will change things quite a bit. So we'll kind of see how that goes. But I hope I did the best with what I have here, and I hope you guys appreciate it. I am out of here, though. Comment down below, like I said. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. I'm out. Go Utes.